My childhood was a tapestry woven with threads of love and an unbearable sorrow. I was the younger sibling, always looking up to my older brother, Michael. Michael was everything I wanted to be: brilliant, restless, with a mind that moved a mile a minute. He was a whirlwind of ideas, a passionate advocate for anything he believed in, a bright, intense light that pulled everyone into his orbit. Our parents, David and Eleanor, adored him. He was their firstborn, their pride, destined for greatness, they often said. I, quieter and more grounded, watched his brilliance with a mixture of admiration and a quiet longing for even a fraction of their intense focus. Then, when I was only 8 years old, Michael vanished. They told me it was an accident. A tragic car crash on a winding mountain road, late at night, alone. His body, they explained, was never recovered, swept away by a sudden flash flood in the ravine below. It was a harrowing, impossible story, but it was the one our parents repeated, their voices hushed, their eyes filled with a grief so profound it seemed to consume them whole. We held a memorial, a somber affair, and life settled into a new, desolate rhythm. Michael became a ghost, a hallowed memory, a tragic story whispered in our family, a void that could never be filled. My parents, once vibrant, became shadows of their former selves. My mother, Eleanor, retreated into a quiet despair, her laughter replaced by frequent, silent tears. My father, David, a man of formidable will and unwavering control, became even more rigid, his grief hardening into a stoicism that bordered on coldness. He insisted we move on, rarely allowing Michael's name to be spoken, his memory preserved in a carefully curated silence. I, left to navigate my own immense grief, struggled in isolation, clinging to fragmented memories of my brilliant, lost brother. I accepted their narrative, believed in their pain, and respected their desire for silence, believing it was too raw to touch. I thought their silence was grief. I didn't realize then that their silence was a carefully guarded shield, protecting not just their sorrow, but a far more devastating, insidious secret that had shaped every corner of my existence. Looking back, the cracks in the narrative, in the carefully constructed facade of my life, were subtle at first, almost imperceptible to my trusting, innocent heart. My father had a peculiar, almost obsessive, attachment to a remote cabin he owned, nestled deep in the mountains, several hours' drive away. He would visit it often, always alone, for business trips, or to clear his head. He'd be gone for days, sometimes a week, returning looking exhausted, but also strangely relieved. He never allowed anyone else to accompany him, always insisting on solitude. I attributed it to his need for quiet, his coping mechanism for grief, nothing more. Then there were the financial oddities. Our family, while comfortable, always seemed to be dealing with unexpected, large expenses. Significant sums of money would disappear from our family accounts, explained away as investments or property taxes. My father would become unusually cagey about these transactions, deflecting questions with a clipped tone. My mother would sigh, a tired, resigned sound, whenever these financial discussions arose. I attributed it to the complexities of adult life, the unseen struggles my stoic parents silently endured. I didn't realize then that these were not just cracks, but gaping chasms, hinting at a truth far more profound, far more horrifying, than I could comprehend. A persistent peculiarity was my mother's occasional, almost involuntary, flinches whenever the subject of Michael's accident came up in public. She'd grow pale, her eyes darting nervously towards my father, a silent plea for him to intervene. She'd sometimes whisper things in her sleep, fragmented words I couldn't quite grasp, but they always left me with a chilling sense of unease upon waking. I thought it was unresolved trauma, her subconscious still wrestling with the horror of his death. I didn't realize then that these were the desperate attempts of a tormented soul trying to break free from a prison of silence. The most unsettling crack, though, was my father's rigid control over any discussion of Michael. There were no photographs of him displayed in the house after a certain age, his name was never spoken after his death, and any attempts to reminisce were met with a firm, almost angry redirection. It was as if he was trying to erase Michael's existence, not just mourn his loss. My mother, despite her profound grief, seemed to comply, her silence a chilling mirror to his command. I always felt a faint sense of something being profoundly wrong, a piece of our family history deliberately missing. I didn't realize then that my entire life was a meticulously constructed deception, and my father, the man I loved, was somehow at the heart of it, a silent architect of my greatest lie. As I grew older, my fascination with Michael, with his memory, deepened, evolving into a quiet, almost obsessive, pursuit of understanding. I yearned to know more about the brother who had vanished, about the circumstances of his tragic death. My father's continued evasiveness, his almost panicked refusal to discuss it, only fueled my quiet obsession, feeding the persistent, nagging feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with the story I had been told. I found old school yearbooks, hidden photographs of Michael from before the accident, trying to piece together fragments of the life he lived, the person he was. I often found myself staring at his old room, now a sterile guest room, a perfect, chilling testament to his erased existence. I didn't realize then that my entire family's existence was a meticulously constructed deception, and Michael, my lost brother, was somewhere, waiting. The climax arrived not with a bang, not with a sudden, shattering explosion, but with the quiet discovery of an old, tattered journal. It was a dreary afternoon, years after Michael's death. My mother, increasingly frail from a long illness, was confined to her bed. My father was on one of his business trips to the remote cabin. I was sorting through some of Mom's old belongings, trying to bring some order to the chaos of her room, when I found it, tucked deep inside a false bottom in her antique hope chest, a small, leather-bound journal. It wasn't a diary. It was a logbook. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first entry, dated shortly after Michael's supposed accident, sent a jolt of icy terror through my entire being, searing its way into my soul. The entries were short, coded, almost frantic. Dates. Locations. And then, terrifying abbreviations: M. Visit, M. Meds, M. Incident, M. Calm. The locations were always remote, unfamiliar, but consistently in the general vicinity of my father's mountain cabin. The entries continued, spanning years, meticulously documenting visits, medication changes, incidents, and attempts to manage Michael. There were also notations of large, unexplained expenses, paid in cash, for care, security, and discretion. My breath hitched. My heart stopped. M. Incident. M. Meds. Michael. He wasn't dead. He was alive. He had been alive all these years. And my father was visiting him. Managing him. Locking him away. The journal included details that twisted my stomach, descriptions of episodes, of unmanageable behavior, of violent outbursts. It spoke of doctors who visited the remote location, of containment, of a desperate need for secrecy. My mind raced, trying to grasp the magnitude of the horror. Michael hadn't died in an accident. He had been secretly institutionalized. Locked away. By my own father. The world went silent, then exploded into a million shattering pieces. It was like a sudden, brutal awakening, a blinding flash of lightning that illuminated the darkest, most horrifying corners of my life. My brother. Alive. Not a tragic memory. But a man hidden away, suffering, perhaps chained, perhaps forgotten by the outside world. My father. Not a grieving widower. But a calculating captor, a man who had lied to me my entire life, stealing my brother, denying me the truth, all out of a terrifying need for control, for secrecy, for family reputation. My mother. Her quiet despair. Her secret tears. Her desperate sighs. She knew. She had known all along. She was complicit in this monstrous lie, this unforgivable act of familial abduction. The emotional chaos was instant, overwhelming. Heartbreak for Michael, for the unspeakable suffering he must have endured, locked away from the world, from his family, for decades. Anger at my father, a hot, venomous rage that pulsed through my veins, consuming me, for his calculated deception, his profound cruelty, his monstrous act of hiding his own son. Shame, for being so blind, so naive, so utterly fooled by the people I loved and revered, the people who were supposed to protect us. And silence. A deafening, echoing silence in my mother's sick room, a silence that magnified the screams in my head, the crashing sound of my world falling apart. My life. My identity. My grief for a dead brother. All of it, obliterated in a single, devastating moment. The man who was supposed to be my protector, my father, had condemned his own son to a hidden prison, and had forced his wife, my mother, to be complicit in the grotesque lie. I looked at the journal, at the meticulous entries, the chilling details. It was undeniable proof of a monstrous, unforgivable act. He hadn't just mourned a son, he had buried him alive, hidden from the world, silenced and suffering. And that's when I realized, they never loved me the way I loved them. What came after was a raw, visceral struggle for survival. I didn't want revenge that would just burn everything down, I wanted truth, justice, and a chance to reclaim my brother, to bring him back into the light. I needed peace, and peace wouldn't come from silence or passive acceptance of this monstrous lie. I sat there, frozen, clutching the journal, the words blurring through my tears. My father would be home soon. I had to choose, protect his secret, remain complicit in the lie that had defined my entire life, or expose the truth, no matter the cost. The initial shock gave way to a cold, hard fury, a burning need for light in the crushing darkness. There was no going back. The truth had to come out. I meticulously gathered the journal, and then, with trembling hands, found the address of the remote cabin, cross-referencing it with an old property deed I remembered seeing in my father's files. My mind raced, forming a desperate plan to find Michael, to confirm the unspeakable. The first, and most agonizing, step was confronting my mother. She was frail, fading fast, her eyes distant with illness. I sat by her bedside, holding her hand, showing her the journal, her own handwriting, her own horrifying entries. Her eyes widened, a flicker of terror and despair in their depths. "Mom," I whispered, my voice raw. "Michael isn't dead, is he? Dad locked him away. And you knew. All this time, you knew." She started sobbing, a raw, guttural sound, begging for forgiveness, pleading for understanding. She confirmed everything. Michael had experienced a severe mental health crisis in his late teens, an aggressive onset of schizophrenia that manifested in paranoid delusions and violent outbursts. My father, terrified of the shame, of the ruin it would bring to his reputation and our family name, refused proper hospitalization. Instead, he found a remote, unregulated facility near his cabin, bribing doctors and caregivers to keep Michael hidden, away from society, away from us. He faked the car accident, the missing body, the entire elaborate charade, to erase Michael from our public life. My mother, trapped by her fear of David, by her desperate need to maintain the family facade, and perhaps by her own immense grief and despair, had complied. She visited Michael secretly, enduring the pain of seeing him ravaged by illness and isolation, but never daring to challenge my father's iron will. She truly believed she was protecting Michael from the perceived stigma of mental illness, and protecting our family from ruin. "I loved him so much, honey," she wept. "I couldn't bear to see him that way. Your father said it was the only way. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The second limb was severed. The trust with my mother, once unbreakable, shattered into a million pieces. Her quiet despair, once a source of sympathy, now felt like a profound betrayal, a complicity in Michael's prolonged suffering. My next step was direct, uncompromising action. I immediately contacted a lawyer specializing in mental health advocacy and elder abuse, given my father's actions. I provided them with the journal, my mother's confession, and the location of the remote facility. Simultaneously, I contacted the police, reporting a missing person, Michael, and providing them with all the details of his supposed accident and the suspicious circumstances. The intervention was swift and decisive. The authorities, armed with the evidence, raided the remote facility. What they found there was horrifying. Michael, now a man in his late 40s, severely malnourished, disoriented, living in squalid conditions, a ghost of his former self. He was alive, but barely. The facility was shut down, the caregivers arrested, and Michael was immediately transferred to a reputable, state-of-the-art mental health facility, where he began receiving the proper care he had been denied for decades. My revenge wasn't about vindictiveness, it was about justice and reclamation. It was about bringing truth to light, about dismantling the monstrous lie that had defined my family, and about freeing my brother from his living tomb. My father, David, was arrested. He was charged with kidnapping, unlawful confinement, fraud, and numerous other counts related to his decades-long cover-up. The news broke like a thunderclap, not just in our town, but nationally. The scandal was immense, horrifying. The perfect, respectable family image he had so carefully cultivated was utterly, irrevocably shattered. The legal process was agonizing, but necessary. My father, stripped of his power, his control, was a broken man. He tried to deny it, to justify it, to blame Michael's illness, but the evidence, the journal, Michael's very existence, was undeniable. He faced severe legal repercussions, public humiliation, and the complete loss of his reputation and freedom. The justice system, slow and imperfect, had finally intervened. My relationship with my father was utterly severed. There was no going back, no forgiveness for a betrayal so profound, so utterly inhumane. The man I had loved and revered no longer existed, he was merely a monster, a cruel lesson in the darkest depths of control and fear. He died in prison a few years later, a lonely, disgraced figure. My relationship with Michael became the central focus of my life. His recovery was long, arduous, and filled with immense challenges. Years of neglect and misdiagnosis had taken their toll. But with proper medication, therapy, and a nurturing environment, glimpses of the brilliant, witty brother I remembered slowly began to re-emerge. Our bond, once fractured by a horrific lie, began to heal, slowly, painfully, but authentically. We learned to navigate his illness together, to build a new life, to reclaim the stolen years, one fragile step at a time. It was a love reborn from the ashes of unimaginable cruelty. My mother, consumed by guilt and the unraveling of her life, passed away shortly after Michael was found. In her final lucid moments, she expressed a profound relief that the truth was out, that Michael was safe, and that I knew. It was a tragic end, but perhaps, a small measure of peace for her tormented soul. I didn't want revenge. I needed peace. And that peace began to bloom when I accepted that my story wasn't about their failures, but about my resilience. It was about standing up for the truth, about fighting for what was right, about proving that I could emerge from the wreckage stronger, wiser, and infinitely more whole. I learned that sometimes, the greatest betrayals lead to the most profound discoveries about yourself, about unwavering love, and about the true meaning of family. My journey to truth was painful, but it led me to a profound understanding of who I am, and who truly protects my heart.